Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Rebecca. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the wisdom and the energy of trees. Trees are much more than something beautiful to look at. Children have fun climbing them, but they have such a huge part to play on the earth. Not only are they transforming carbon dioxide into pure, clean oxygen for us all to breathe, they provide food for the soil, they provide food for birds, creatures, other animals, but they also hold deep, deep wisdom. And surprisingly, I found they also have a lot of emotion. The first time that I really connected with the energy of trees, I was in the forest. It was a new place that I had discovered. It was about 6 years ago. And I came across this beautiful oak tree. And I remember thinking it was so picturesque. It looked just like if you saw a painting or, like a greetings card, the kind of oak tree that you would picture, just perfect with that perfect oak shape, just standing in the middle of this beautiful open area of heather and gorse, and it was just stunning. And I remember seeing it and just feeling this really deep connection with it. And that was the first time I had really kind of connected into the energy of trees. And I went and I stood by it and I put my hands on it, and I remember I could just feel this surge of, the only way I can really describe it was like life force. I could feel this beautiful life force energy. This lovely kind of, it was almost like, if you can imagine, seeing a grandparent and climbing up on a grandparent's knee and having that lovely warm hug. It really felt like that. And that was how my journey kind of began with trees. And I asked if I could take a photo of it, and it said yes. And it was just kind of letting me feel the joy and the beautiful kind of love that it had for where it stood and where it grew. And you could just feel the wisdom of it. You think of the many hundreds of years that some trees have been around, and the people, the animals, the things that have walked by it. They're just so wonderful. And also, I think they are such an interesting part of our history, because with trees, that they've been there for hundreds of years. Think of the way that the soil has changed, their environment has changed. Perhaps they are in areas that have been built upon by humans. Different animals have come and gone and perhaps used them as their homes. And working with trees it's not something I do all the time. I spend a lot of time in the forest, and I can always feel when I'm in the forest that I'm in the power of nature. I'm in the power of the trees and the wisdom of the trees. I'm always very aware of them, but I'm not always engaged in conversation with them. I've found that sometimes particular trees will perhaps kind of interact with my energy and make me aware of their presence and that they would like to interact, and then we can have deeper conversations. But generally, I feel like the trees are like a huge community. They're like this big community, a big network, all working together, but also all experiencing their own individual lives, which is, again, it's a lot like humanity. I talk about this often within the animal kingdom, that they're different, but they all also have very similar things going on to how humans are experiencing their lives. And so that was my first kind of encounter with trees, and understanding that trees actually communicate. I'm saying like they're a community. They are a very well connected network that will speak to each other. So if there is a danger to them, they will kind of send out like almost like, to us it would be a silent signal, but for them they're working on energy, so they send out a signal to the other trees, which will then bounce and bounce and bounce to where it needs to go. They're sending out signals about dangers or changes that are occurring, or also just kind of letting each other know, of their presence. They communicate an awful lot. They will also gift energy to other trees if other trees are struggling. And something that I have been quite aware of lately is in the forest, when trees have fallen, or if trees are still rooted, but they have, they've come out where perhaps the ground is quite soggy, and they have come out and they are leaning against another tree. I wanted to know if that was uncomfortable. You could imagine, excuse me, you could imagine as a human, perhaps if you were sitting on public transport and somebody fell asleep that you didn't know that was sitting next to you and they're leaning on you, it might be quite uncomfortable when you might think, oh, I don't know this person, this is uncomfortable, they're in my space. And I wanted to understand from the trees whether they had a similar feeling about it. But they actually don't. They are very supportive of each other. Even different tree species, I can't get my words out, different tree species, they are very supportive of each other, because not like humans, they don't see the differences between us. They appreciate the uniqueness, but they don't see those things as differences or something that is, it's not a negative thing. Everything in nature is kind of embracing every other thing in nature, which is something that humanity could really benefit from learning. And recently, it was quite a few months ago, I went into the forest, and it's a beautiful little secluded area that I go to, and it feels like whenever I go in there at all different times of the year, and it's an ever-changing landscape, and it's beautiful, but it feels like a little magical fairy glen, because it's very quiet. It's down a little track that most people wouldn't know was there. And in the winter, it can get quite boggy. And in the summertime, it gets quite overgrown with the ferns and, the trees and all their beautiful leaves. But it's a real hive for wildlife. I saw a dragonfly down there before. A deer are often in there, and in the summertime and the springtime, just the birds singing it's like an orchestra. It's beautiful. But as I said, it gets quite boggy in this area, and we had a lot of rain at the time that I went down there. We'd had a lot of rain in previous weeks, and the soil had become so boggy that a lot of the bigger trees, mainly silver birch, were lifting up. They were lifting up out of the ground, and quite a few trees had fallen. And there's one tree on the path that I often have walked past, in the many years that I've been doing this little trail. I've walked past this tree several times, and I was really sad to go down the path and to see that a huge portion of it had kind of snapped off, where I guess it had lifted slightly, but then this huge portion had snapped off. And it made me really sad. I was like, oh no, it's, poor tree, because it was beautiful. It was, it was looking really nice, and in the summertime it had lots of lovely foliage on it. And I just felt quite sad, and I thought, I wonder if, nature's quite accepting. It's accepting of its cycles and the things that go on. But I wanted to know whether the tree was actually upset that this had happened to it. And I went over to it, and I kind of, I think it's always respectful to announce your presence. Obviously, they're aware of you. They're aware of you walking. They can hear you talking. But I think it's respectful to announce your presence rather than just to go up and lay hands on the tree. It would be like a stranger coming up to you and just touching you. You wouldn't like it. So I announced my presence to the tree. And immediately I felt this. The only way I can describe it was seasickness. I felt really quite unwell. It was that rocking, nauseous motion that I was feeling, and almost like all of me was vibrating, like, I guess, like a bit like trembling. If you've especially as a child, if you ever remember being really upset and you've been crying, and then as the crying subsides, you're kind of, it's almost like a shivering and you're trying to catch your breath. This was all of these feelings I was getting from the tree, and it made me feel quite unwell. And I wrote down, I just want to check my phone, because I wrote down exactly what it said to me at the time so that I would remember it to come back to a later date. And I asked the tree, was it upset that it had fallen? And it said, it was sudden. It happened so fast. I wasn't ready. I felt strong. And so despite the fact that it felt strong, this had kind of almost come out of nowhere, that it suddenly had broken off and fallen. And it really felt quite sad. And the feeling I got was that it would, it would move through this. This was like a grief process. It would move through this, but also it was experiencing these very real emotions, almost, I would say, as if human emotions. It was very shocked that this had happened. It was quite sad because it had felt very strong and it was happy there, and it had been there for many years. And this feeling was awful. This seasickness feeling was just really awful. I had to kind of like take my hand off of its trunk to kind of steady myself, because it was making me feel really quite unwell. And I sort of, I spoke to the tree, and I'd said about, I'd observed that the ground had been very wet, and I had a further look, and it did look like there was perhaps a little bit of disease or rot within some of the trunk. You could see where it was a little bit weak. And again, that was quite surprising, because even though it had this, it was kind of, it was getting on with things, and it was still feeling quite strong and quite happy. And so I called in the nature spirits, and I just asked, to please surround this tree with love, to help it through this process of understanding that it had fallen, and to also, to bless any of the other trees that had fallen. And you could also feel, it's quite hard to describe, but the way I would say is, like with the other trees, it was almost like a crowd peering in on this tree, like, are you okay? They were kind of observing what was happening with this tree. And so I could feel that they would be, as I'd mentioned earlier, that trees will gift other trees energy when they need it. They would be sending through the network of, the root system, and also with the mycelium, they would be sending some healing positive energy up to this tree to also help it in its process to move forward. And so I said to the tree, I'll be thinking of you. I'll continue to keep you in my thoughts, and I will come back and I will check on you. And 2 weeks later, I went back to check. And when I went back to check and I put my hand on the tree again, I felt this feeling of calm. There was still that kind of what I call like the vibration, like a little bit of a shivery feeling, but it was nothing like the intensity that I had felt when this had first happened. And I felt the tree, and I said to it, how are you feeling now? Are you okay? And it said, I'm okay. I still feel a bit shocked, but I'm doing much better. I'm okay. And, and I will continue to be okay. And it really blew me away, because it's the first time I had ever really engaged in that kind of conversation and considered that. I mean, I know obviously working with animals, I know that they have emotions and likes and dislikes. And really looking back on it, why would it be any different with anything in nature? That, everything has a soul contract here. Everything has energy. So why would it be any different that the tree experiences feelings of shock and grief and loss, and has a process of moving through when its life as it knew it has changed? And so I wanted to share it today for you to be more aware that, when you're walking among the trees, don't just see their beauty, but remember that they have so much wisdom, and they are also navigating a journey. I kind of didn't really think about it until I sat down to do this video, and I was looking for my notes. I didn't realise how many interactions I have actually had with trees at different points on this journey, and I have actually had quite a few different interactions. So it's something I will, I'll bring back again to talk about. But I think this one really touched me. It touched me so deeply, and the fact that I could feel the energy shift, the power of not only the power of prayer or, positive, loving intention towards this tree that I was sending, but also the beautiful support and love and assistance that the rest of the surrounding trees and the earth were giving to this tree to help it through this difficult time. I think that's a real teaching moment as well for humanity, that, things may seem simple on the outside, like, a tree's fallen down. It may seem simple, but you don't realize all the complex feelings that go along with that, and the fact that even after that event has occurred, this tree is still moving through, the process of understanding that life as it knew it has now changed drastically. And that's the same with people. Things may happen, and it may be, even especially like when things are in the news, it may be news for a day or for a week. And once it's out of the news, we tend to forget about it. But actually, the person or the people who have experienced this change in the way their life that they knew was, they're still moving through a process. They're still moving through and growing. And I think it's important that we remember that sometimes it's the unseen things that really could do with our love and support. So I'll leave that with you today. I hope that perhaps it's given you a new perspective and understanding of trees. And like I said, I will bring in some more tree wisdom, because I've had some beautiful encounters and I find trees fascinating. I love watching the process they go through, when they rest in the winter, and then as the spring comes and they start producing all their new buds, and then they burst into life in the, the late spring and the summer. I just think it's beautiful. And I think, again, we can see lots of similarities of our own, our own selves on our journeys. So leaving that with you with lots of love from the trees, the nature kingdom, and from my spirit team as well. Thanks for listening. I'll speak to you again soon. If you would like to look at my other work, which relates more to the human experience, you can follow my other channel here on YouTube, which is Spirit Journey of Enlightenment, the same as my Instagram. And on here also, I will be posting more videos about my communication with the animal kingdom. Thanks for listening. Speak to you soon.